And now you have a suspicion built up. Farmers scared to talk to one another, and believe me, it's real. And I often think back, and so we are saying we have a new culture on the prairie. It isn't agriculture, it's a new fear culture where farmers are scared to work together or trust one another or have coffee on Coffee Row discussing farm policies. And I often think back in my own family. I'm a third generation farmer. My grandparents came from Europe at the turn of the century, and my grandparents and my parents had to work together to build our country, our schools, roads, hospitals, the same as here. Now we have that breakdown of a real social fabric. And to me, as a former politician, I think that's the worst thing that could have happened with the introduction of GMOs. I don't know how many phone calls Louise and myself have had from farm women, especially farm women, crying on the phone and saying, Monsanto's police have been here, or investigators have been here, they threaten we won't have a farm left, what should we do? And we'll try and advise them where to get legal help. And I said, I'm not talking about a few cases. Now, I have the time, and I think it's important to know what happens when you have GMOs introduced. Farmers call these letters extortion letters. And believe me, if you and I would do the same thing what Monsanto's doing, we'd be thrown into jail. And this is sent to, we don't know how many thousands of farmers in both countries have received this letter. But believe me, if you have said something negative about Monsanto, I guarantee you, you'll get one of these letters as a farmer from Monsanto. And in it, it states, I'll just give you some of the clauses. We have reason to believe that you might be growing Monsanto's GMOs without a license. We estimate you have 200 acres, 500 acres, or whatever, and in lieu of us not taking you to court, send us $200,000, $100,000. I have one letter here, $750,000 in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time, and we may or may not take you to court because we think you might be growing Monsanto's GMOs. So now can you, oh, and another clause that states you're not allowed to show this letter to anyone or we will fine you. And can you imagine the fear in a farm family when they get a letter like this from $1 billion corporation, send us $100,000 because we think you might be growing our GMOs without a license. Fear in a farm family from $1 billion corporation. So, as I said, a whole new culture of fear. So those are some of the things you never ever hear about with the introduction of GMOs. I mentioned the health issue, the environmental issue, but I think the human issue and the human rights issue is one of the most important things. So those are some of the issues that have arisen with the introduction of GMOs. Lucy mentioned the terminator gene, and I'll just briefly touch on that. And for those of you who do not know the actions of a terminator gene, basically it's a gene that's put into a seed, and when the seed becomes a plant, all the seeds from that plant are sterile, or you cannot use it again. But the danger of that also is it can cross-pollinate into your neighbor's crop, indigenous crop, and render those seeds also sterile. Again, another danger that scientists are telling me, they feel that the terminator gene can be installed in any higher life form. So it has become really a serious situation. These companies call themselves life science. Here is a science that promotes death, that determination of life. And I think it's absolutely criminal that that was ever developed. And who owns the terminator gene at the present time? 50% the US government and 50% Monsanto. That's who owns the terminator gene. Now, if that is not bad enough, there is another new gene out. And on the prairies, we call it the cheater gene. And the cheater gene works like this, along with the terminator gene, is that both genes are put into a seed, the seed becomes a plant, but under the cheater gene, the plant will not produce a seed until you spray a chemical on. When you spray the chemical on, the plant will then produce the seed, and then the terminator kicks in and renders the seed sterile. And it will give the corporations then, if it was ever introduced, to total control of the seed supply and then the food supply. So we think it was absolutely criminal for the companies even to introduce a type of seed like that. So, but there was another reason they introduced it, or trying to introduce it, is this. Then they don't have to mess around with contracts, because a farmer is forced to buy a seed each year. So that's the Terminator and cheater gene. Another issue, and the issue of pharma plants. Many of you don't know that there are 6 major drugs being produced by plants, at least 6 major prescription type drugs being produced by GMO plants now at the present time. And I'll try and remember by memory those drugs. Industrial enzymes, growth hormones, blood thinners, blood clotters, contraceptives, and there's another one, but those are some of the main ones that are being produced by plants at the present time, GMO plants. And it's done not in enclosed facilities, it's being done in the open or in the wild, as we call it. And I was at a meeting not long ago in California, where there was a doctor from Oregon that has done a lot of study on pharmaceutical plants, or pharma plants as we call it, and the effects of them. First of all, he said they now have also evidence that those pharmaceutical plants are cross-pollinating into other plants in those families where those drugs are being produced. And he gave examples of what can happen, and may be happening already. And he said this: if a person has had surgery, and then you eat a drug that has a blood thinner in, what will the effects be? Another example he gave, if a woman is pregnant, and then she eats a food with a contraceptive drug in, what will the results be? And I think it's really important to us in North America because we do not have labeling. We do not know what's in our food. And I think it's a drastic violation of human rights in Canada when we don't know what's in our food. Europe, the European Union, they all have labeling. Russia has will not permit GMO foods. Brazil will not permit GMO food, and neither does Europe. So we should demand labeling so we know what's in our food. 3 years ago, my wife and I took Canada to court in Geneva, in Switzerland, under the United Nations Human Rights Commission, charging Canada for drastic violations because of the labeling. As we said, everyone should have the right to know what's in our food, and that it violated our rights. There was another issue we brought forward to the United Nations Human Rights, and that was the academic issue. We said that too much of our funding, or most of our funding now, is coming from the private source, the corporations at our universities and research stations, and it has to go back to public purse. Because we really felt strongly on that, because we have 6 grandchildren at the present time in university. What kind of future will they have if they are totally controlled by a corporation when they graduate? If they want to do research or work at a university, if the funding is controlled by a corporation and it has been in the direction of what that corporation wants. So our total academic freedom is also being taken away, besides the farmers' academic freedom, or farming is being taken away, and the same thing on the consumer. So freedom has to go back to our academics. Source of funding has to go back to the public purse. So those are some of the issues we brought forward to the United Nations at Geneva. Canada has not answered to the charges yet at the present time. And how can Canada say or accuse China and other countries of drastic violations of human rights? What about Canada itself? Violations of human rights. So we better clean up our own doorstep first before we start charging other countries in the world. So those are some of the things that Louise and I have done to bring awareness and trying to bring fairness and freedom of speech back to our people. Lucy mentioned also about regulatory approval. A number of years ago, I took all the documentation supplied by Monsanto to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency before they got regulatory approval, and all the experimentations and stuff, and I think it was 400 pages of it, I took it to the School of Science in Japan,